Valve's Steam Deck is a legendary piece of hardware that has changed the industry forever. But just like every other handheld system on the market, the Steam Deck is not perfect. So today I'll just be going over my experience and some tips and tricks that I've picked up about the Steam Deck. This is Nick, and I'm really excited to get this started, so let's just do it. So let's talk about the Steam Deck's software. The Steam Deck runs a customized version of Arch, by the way, Linux, which they have branded SteamOS. But this isn't your uncle's old, hey look, I changed Ubuntu to make the background cool. This turns out to be really handy, as SteamOS actually has Valve's Proton built in. Proton is a compatibility layer that sits between Windows games and Linux, so that Windows games can run on Linux for the most part. This is similar in spirit to Wine, which is another option for playing Windows games on other operating systems. This immediately brings a large number of Windows-only games to the Steam Deck, which is awesome, because while running Windows on the Steam Deck is possible, it's not quite the best experience. I mean, to be fair, SteamOS does have its issues, but with Windows it's much more of a dicey operating system for the Steam Deck. Now let's talk about some of SteamOS's downsides. For one, it is Arch Linux, which is awesome, but is a distro that I'm not really familiar with. So in desktop mode, simple tasks like connecting Bluetooth devices don't work perfectly, which I get it Linux fans. I understand that there is probably a very easy way to solve this. But at the same time, this is a consumer product where most of the time people aren't going to go out to Reddit or Stack Overflow and find their issues solved. They're just going to say, this isn't working. Why? The different interfaces on the Steam Deck are really interesting. There's desktop mode, which is just Arch Linux, by the way, with a Plasma KDE desktop environment, which props to Valve for making this very easily accessible. And there's also gaming mode. Gaming mode simplifies it and almost gives you a Steam Big Picture-like experience. Here, I have no problems connecting Bluetooth devices or launching games, but I do have issues with quitting games that are unresponsive. If you're unlucky enough to have something crash on you, you kinda just have to press the Steam button, press exit game, and hope for the best that it does actually exit the game. Otherwise, you can reboot the system, or you can go into desktop mode and quit it, but to my knowledge, there is no way to force quit an application that is unresponsive from gaming mode, which is really the only main issue I've had with gaming mode as an interface. Most of my issues are just, it's Linux, it doesn't work perfectly all the time, and anyone who uses Linux regularly can probably agree with that. But overall, the Steam Deck is an amazing experience. And what do you use the Steam Deck for? To play games. So let's take a look at a few of those. The library on the Steam Deck is basically endless. Not only do you have games officially from Steam, but you also have other options. This is Mario Kart 8 Deluxe using the Yuzu emulation platform. It takes a little while to load because, it is through an emulator, but once it does start to load, it's pretty fast, and with some tinkering, I was able to get full speed Nintendo Switch emulation. Now let's take a look at some of the details and kind of pixel peep here. We're getting a solid 60 FPS, other than the first start of the race, which, is still loading in assets, so I think that's fine. While the CPU is, about 50% utilized at most, and the GPU is 50 to 60% utilized at most. Meanwhile, the entire system is only drawing about 20 watts from the battery, which is pretty crazy considering that, it's a whole PC built into a handheld form factor. Let's move on to another more demanding game. Now, I'm not a game review channel, but Stray is an amazing title. Just like with Mario Kart 8, I have cut out a lot of the loading times so that it's, more interesting of a video, but again, the loading times are really reasonable, so I don't think that's a problem. In the game's opening sequence, we're getting a solid 40 to 60 FPS, which is pretty awesome. But then as soon as we start rendering more complex geometry and more complex scenes, well, we've dropped down to less than 20. Which, again, isn't a problem. This is a very cinematic moment in the game, and, 20 FPS doesn't sound great, but I say this isn't a problem because this, to my experience, is really the only point we go this low as far as frame rate goes. During gameplay, we almost always get a solid 30 to 40 FPS, which is very playable, especially on a handheld system. Now keep in mind, I wanted it to be as close to stock as possible, so I really haven't messed or fiddled with the game visual settings. This looks great. Not just for a handheld system either. I mean, especially here where you can see, far in the distance, it's really good. And again, we're getting a solid 30 FPS here. Now when I look at the ground or at a wall, you can see that the frame rate jumps quite a bit higher, and this scene here is particularly impressive to me, where you come out of the kind of the hole in the ground and you look out on this amazing view. We're still stuck at a solid 30 FPS, barely dropping below that, and if we are, it's very momentarily. This is a great demonstration of Valve's Proton at work, and although it doesn't work perfectly well all the time, so right here you can see that there are some flashing artifacts when you kind of zoom in on this area, but overall you wouldn't be able to tell that these artifacts are there unless you're specifically looking for them. I mean, what are the odds that you look straight up and zoom in? Now let's take a look at the system itself. The Steam Deck is really well built. There's really not much flex, even when I really try to flex it. The analog triggers provide an awesome amount of travel, and the shoulder buttons are mounted on clicky tactile switches. All the buttons provide a great amount of travel, like the D-pad here, and the buttons on this side. And what's a little weird to me is that the B button is kind of curved with the rest of the system, which is a neat design. Overall, the machine is super comfortable to hold as long as you have something to rest your arms on. It is a little heavy, so holding it just straight out in the air is not super ideal. The speakers are pretty great. I was able to get a decent sense of 3D space with just the two built-in speakers. That's not going to take the place of a speaker in a party or anything, but it gets decently loud and it sounds pretty good. Overall, I'm very confident in saying that this is the single biggest jump in the handheld market, basically since the Game Boy. And I am super excited to see what the market does from here. Of course, we don't want Valve to be the only competitors because, you know, competition breeds innovation. And I'd love to see some more powerful handhelds in the future. Thank you so much for watching. It's been a pleasure reviewing the Steam Deck, and honestly, I really enjoyed making this video. So if this is a format that people like, let me know. Thanks. Have a great day.